It's not our spirituality, it's our anxious attachment style that causes so many problems in our relationships as six sensories. So we assume sometimes as six sensories that people can't take our belief system because we do believe in things like guides, people from the other side helping us, being able to manifest, miracles happening. And not all of these phenomena can be explained logically. And so it's easy to build a story in your head, even if you've experienced amazing experiences and you've had so much help from the universe. Because you can't explain it easily to five sensories or relate to those types of people with your life events, you might think that somehow your life story is not okay, or it's not all right to share these moments that are so important to you, so meaningful, so valid, so sacred. And therefore you start seeing yourself as an other. You start seeing yourself as somebody who doesn't fit in with others, and you have to build walls and protect yourself. And I do talk about boundaries, and it is important to have a healthy layer of protection from bad behavior from five sensories. Having said that, you can overdo it and build a wall so you let nobody in, and then you're completely isolated from the world. And this is where you go overdoing it. And the other way that sometimes people go, instead of building a wall, is that they're anxiously attached and they're very needy and they're texting people a lot. They're shaking, waiting for the next phone call. And that's anxious attachment style, where it's one of your caregivers when you were a child maybe disappeared on you. Maybe they didn't give you a lot of food. You're eating mac and cheese for days or something because they're out busy working 24/7 and they forgot to get groceries, something like that. And it really frightened you as a child. And how that manifests when you're an adult is that you're waiting for somebody to text and respond to you. You're waiting for the next potentially meet up or get together, and you can't really control yourself. You have to keep texting or calling to see what the other person is doing. But how that manifests on the other side is it gets very annoying. Think about an app that's very annoying that sends you a lot of notifications. We all have apps like that these days. But if you're that person who's very needy and you're constantly text, call, you're like an annoying app, except you're a human being to the other person. And that's what anxious attachment style does to you. It's because you didn't have your needs met as a child immediately. And sometimes it's so immediate, it's like when you're a baby, your parents have to automatically pay attention to you. They automatically have to feed you. They automatically have to love you and hold you. And even if you don't get that, you can still feel like you're deprived later on if you haven't dealt with those feelings as an adult. So the first realization you need to realize if you have anxious attachment style is that you are an adult. So therefore you are responsible for your feelings. So if somebody's not responding to you or not calling you in the timeline you'd hoped for, it is your responsibility to self-soothe. And you are the adult, so your inner adult can take care of your inner child. You can become your own best parent. And it's not the story that people don't accept who you are or you have a different belief system that is really the main narrative that's controlling your life. It's that you were a golden child and you had to do whatever it took to please your parents. And that pattern has followed you into adulthood. So if your parents are divorced, sometimes this happens because one parent's the primary caregiver and they're so insanely busy that you have to support them a bit as a child, which is extremely sad. And some of your needs may not get met as a child because you don't have a present parent that's always there for you. Or even if you have two parents in the household, they can still be busy trying to survive depending on where they live. If you grew up in a big city, your parents, both of them, probably had to work to make everything work for the household. And so as a child, we might interpret that as I need my relationship to be hyper responsive in order to feel safe. And that's not a realistic expectation when we're all adults. We all have responsibilities and schedules and duties to fulfill. So you can't really expect another adult to be on call for you all the time, to give you comfort, to give you joy, to give you whatever emotion you're looking for. And so it's not the story of being different. We think sometimes the story of being different is what pushes people away without really looking at our behaviors. That's kind of like the shortcut. That's kind of like the easy thing to target. It's oh, I'm different. My spirituality is different, and that's why people don't respond to me. But it's really, you have to zone in on the behavior. It's your behavior that's causing problems in your relationship, and you really need to review that. You need to look into that. And the primary thing you probably need to do in your relationships is just relax, right? I know that sounds like very generic advice. I know people are like, I've heard this before, but finding something to do with this anxious energy. And if you really can't relax, go exercise, go do something. You know, maybe you are destined to have a business. Maybe you're destined to write a book. You know, sometimes when we have an anxious attachment style, it's because that energy wants to come out into some sort of creative expression in life. It could be a creative project where you're creating things of beauty, maybe crafts, but you have to take the energy and channel it somewhere. You've got to do something with it. Otherwise, it's going to sabotage you. It's going to mess up your relationships. And even the smallest thing, the smallest overcompensation in a relationship can really put people off. And you have to constantly monitor and watch for that in order to really manifest good, healthy relationships. One thing I love to do in my spare time is cooking. I love vegetarian food. I'm very good at cooking, and I'm really glad that I can provide for myself in terms of nutrition and value cooking. But I was reflecting recently about my relationships in the past, and I realized actually my cooking can get in the way of having healthy relationships. And it's like, well, how does that work? How would that be a bad thing that you can provide food and delicious meals for people? It's because it's a way of overgiving. And it's so natural, because when you cook food, you naturally have a lot of stuff. It's like when you cook food, it makes sense to cook a large quantity, right? Rather than just a smaller quantity. And it's just such an easy thing to us to give, right? For people like me who like to cook. But to the other person receiving it might be like too much. So you always have to be aware of that when you're cooking. It's like you do it for you. You do it for your self-love and for your own health. It's not for another person. At least not until marriage. And even then, they may want to eat out. They may want to eat something different. So you can't be pushing food on people, especially early phases of relationships. I know that seems so simple, so dumb. But when you are pushing food on people early on, then that brings up red flags that you're trying to pursue a relationship and push people into commitment before they're ready. It's something I never thought about before, but it was a realization that I had recently, a life lesson where I was like, oh, even my leftovers, my cooking can raise red flags. And I have to watch that. Like, it's okay to cook, nothing wrong with it. Just be aware of when I'm offering for people and not necessarily offer so often, keep it for myself, right? I know, it's just the world we live in is so complicated, and even the littlest thing that we do can be overgiving nowadays. And so we have to be constantly conscious and aware and watching our habits to see where are we overgiving as six sensories. That's what it was for me recently, but maybe it's different for you. Maybe you're overgiving in the sense that you're overspending and you're giving too many gifts to your potential partner or to your family and you're spoiling them. Or maybe you're over cleaning the place and you're basically blistering yourself, scrubbing the floor, and they don't appreciate it. And maybe that's the way you're overgiving. Or maybe you're overgiving by just texting and calling and initiating too much, and you really need to pull back, give people a break, you know? And if you don't do that, that's where you can really go wrong in your relationships when you have anxious attachment style.